Well, hello. Hope you guys are doing well. We are going to be starting here in just a minute or two. We're streaming live on Facebook and on StreamYard, and then we'll be recording this for some folks as well. And we're going to be talking today about the power of words, how to influence action. So excited to have this conversation. We'll give it just a minute or two to get started. But as you're climbing on in here, I'd love to hear kind of where are you from. So if you're joining us from around the country, love to hear where you are joining us from. We love to see people from all over, and I know we've got some representation today. So throw in the chat there where you are joining us from. We'd love to hear it. And also, I want you to start by just starting to answer the question of what are you looking for in your business that would improve the more influence that you have? What is the area that would transform inside of your business as the elements of influence increase? This is a topic that I realized as I started to prepare for it, there's a lot of meat to this, and we're going to go through 60 some slides in 60 minutes here, but there's a lot that I realize I've studied over the years about language patterns and NLP and influence and a stack of books here, and we're just going to scratch the surface of it. But my hope is that in the process of scratching the surface, that you will then find a reason to dig deeper in your own life. So look forward to doing that. Again, let us know where you're joining in from. If you haven't been on one of these before, just as a quick reference point, this is my reason for doing everything. This is ultimately the one crew that I want to influence. And some days I feel like I'm doing great, and a lot of days I feel like I'm doing terrible. And that's probably the journey that we're all on, right? So I'm learning right alongside of you. But this is my family. And at the end of the day, what I love about doing sessions like this is I love helping entrepreneurs build a business and a life they love. And the reality is those are so interconnected, and influence and where we show up in leadership is absolutely at the heart of both of those. So there we go. By the way, save the date for the next one. So some of these I do solo, and some of these I do with my my partner in crime here, Katrina. And we are going to be coming back towards the end of this month doing another session on communications, our communication cadence, how we run that, how we do daily huddles, how we do weekly meetings, what sort of rhythms do we have around communications and our calendar. So we'd love to walk you through that and hope to see you there. Please sign up. But let's dive into some content here. Why do our words matter? Why do our words matter? I wonder whether you're taking notes or you want to drop them in the chat. I want to know for you, what have you learned about communication skills and your ability to communicate, maybe with your team, maybe with your clients? Why do your words matter so much? The reality is this is a meaty topic, and it impacts every single area of our life. And we're going to be talking today about a word called influence. And the reality is that in a way we could have almost rewritten this course as a leadership class, right? Here's John Maxwell. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. To be a better leader, we need to focus on how we influence others. Like, that's absolutely a stand. Tony Robbins says it this way: leadership is the ability to significantly influence the thoughts, feelings, actions, and behaviors of those they lead. That's what leadership is. I would add this: ethical leadership is to do this in an ecological way. Ecological is a fancy phrase from the neuro-linguistic programming community called do it in their best interest. Like, is what you're doing with somebody, if you're influencing them, are you doing it in this like mind control way where you're getting them to do something that actually isn't in their best interest or isn't what they want to do? Or are you actually helping them find the resourcefulness or the thought patterns inside of them to do what they actually want? Kudos to Gary Keller, probably the best definition of leadership that I can think of. Leadership is teaching people how to think so they do what they must do so they get what they want. You could even add when they want it. If leadership is helping people do what they have to do so they get what they want, then the reality is all influence, all conversations that we have about how are we using our language patterns, how are we using our bodies, how are we helping to influence others in our life, whether that's our clients or our team, it is all an example of how what leadership looks like in action. So, all right, 3 things that we're going to talk about today. Number 1, we're going to talk about understanding someone's model of the world. We're going to talk about building rapport. And then we're going to talk about how to lead people by transforming 3 things, right? So understanding someone's model of the world, we'll start there. We're going to talk about ways to build rapport with people. And then ultimately, we're going to talk about how do you lead people or how do you exercise influence? And there's 3 areas that you can think of it in. Physiology, that's the physical body in a way. Focus and meaning. Now, this right here, this is straight from Tony Robbins. If you ever walked on fire, maybe years back, you're gonna recognize this. This stuff is straight from Tony Robbins' content from Unleash the Power Within. Physiology, focus, and meaning is this triad that he has that is like, hey, here's a way to think about this. So to lead others, we want to empower them with resources. Now, the reason I say this is we're giving people resources, and then we start to ask ourselves the question, well, where do those resources come from? I mean, is it something that we're giving them from outside? Is it like we're bestowing a gift on them? No, the mindset that we want to have here is that every single person that we are interacting with, they are the hero of their own story. They are the hero. We are not the hero. We are we're like Yoda, right? We might be the guide along the journey, or we're Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. We are the guide, and they are the hero of the story. And so a lot of the times when we talk about empowering people with resources, it's not so much something that we give them as it is something that we help ignite from inside of them, or something that was already in there that we just breathe a little bit of life into, or clear away some of the confusion so that they get it. So when you think about your present state plus appropriate resources, which could come from inside, gives us a desired state. And that's what leadership and influence starts to look like. So step number 1, understand their model. This is learn how they see the world. So when we're interacting with people, we're often asking ourselves this series of questions, right? How do they see themselves? What do they value? How do they make decisions? And I want to walk us through some steps that we take to do that. Now, as you're going through this, what you're going to realize is a lot of this stuff you're saying, I do that. I already do that. And the reality is you probably do most of this. Okay. You probably do most of what I'm going to talk about here. The question is, do you do it at a conscious level? Do you understand sort of where you learned that approach or how you got good at it? It's a little bit like if you were going to teach a 16-year-old to drive, which I'm in the process of doing right now, right? Our third born just turned 16, so she's learning to drive, and I am in the passenger seat teaching her how to drive. And I remember how hard it is to teach somebody to parallel park from the passenger seat, right? We're taking something that we do at an unconscious competence level, and we're pulling it all the way back to say, well, exactly how does that work? All right. So when we talk about understanding their view of the world, one of the first things to think about is understanding their identity. Tony Robbins, identity is the most powerful source to influence human psychology. The strongest force in human personality is the need to stay consistent with how we define ourselves. Now, we can see this show up with our clients. We can see this show up with our teams. Like, imagine somebody joins your team. They're a fantastic agent, but at the end of the day, their identity is my name needs to be the name on the sign. You could make any adjustments you want to make about splits or perks or compensation, but if you're not meeting that core need that is consistent with their identity, it's very likely that the relationship is going to part ways, right? Here's the way I think about it. It's like every single one of us, right? We are looking in a mirror, and the version that we see of ourselves might not be what others see. But influence is all about figuring out, what do people see when they look in the mirror? If you want to make a note here, go study Tony Robbins' 6 Human Needs. That could be an entire 3-hour course on that, but go study Tony Robbins, write down 6 human needs, and go learn about the idea of certainty and uncertainty and significance and love and contribution and growth, love and connection, growth and contribution. Those 6 human needs drive every single one of us. And when we can start to look at our clients, our team members, our families, and understand what identity is coming from behind them, that's the first step in learning how to influence at a deep level. I love this quote. So this is Phil Jones. Phil Jones wrote a book called Exactly What to Say. I'm going to quote him a couple of times in here as well. And he has a series of language patterns, right? So one of his language patterns is this: how open-minded are you? Example, how open-minded are you to learning a set of words that could dramatically increase your sales? Now, this is what's interesting. Phil has some amazing word patterns inside of his books. I want to kind of explain to you why this works. And here's how this connects with what we were just talking about. No one wants to be seen as closed-minded, right? No one identifies personally as closed-minded. Therefore, to save face, your recipient will likely pause and listen to what you have to say, even if he or she is initially opposed to your ideas, because you just said something that lined up with their identity. Now that you've got their prospect's attention, you can go on into the conversation, right? How open-minded are you is a great opening in a conversation because it lines up with somebody's identity. So the second thing I wanted to study is, what do they value, right? Are they moving away from something? Are they moving towards something? So here might be an example. When you ask somebody, if you're in the real estate industry, what do you want in a home? What are you looking for in a home? And what you might hear next is a series of words. So one, think of these as hot button words, right? Which are words we're going to want to write down specifically, because those words have much deeper meaning to them than they're ever going to us. But if somebody were to say, I want to move out to the country for peace and quiet, right? Or I want to move out of the city to get away from the crime. We start to notice a couple of things. One, we get language patterns, right? Peace and quiet. I would be writing that down. That's how they describe serenity, right? That's how they describe country living, perhaps. So I care about the exact words that they use, but I also care about, are they moving away from something or towards something, right? I want to be in the mountains for fresh air. Sounds like a towards value, right? I want to get out of the cramped city life. That's an away from value. Then when we start to ask the question, why is that important to you? And by the way, if you're going to want to take notes on some of these or grab screenshots of the slides, most of the way that we build rapport and most of the way that we exercise influence in our relationships is going to come through asking amazing questions. So you're going to see in here a series of questions. I'd encourage you to jot them down. And these are the questions that I bring into my normal toolbox in using with clients and team members. So that question, why is that important to you? Now, this is great. Listen to what a person says after the word because. That will often be a towards or an away from statement. So listen to what a person says after the word because. That often gives you a clue to that towards or away from. By the way, here's another author that I'd love for you guys to start to study. Her name is Shel Rose Charvet, I think. This is an amazing book. It's a super thick book. I thought I had it here, maybe not. Words that change minds. And I now that I've started to study some NLP work and some Tony Robbins work and work from this study, like there's a lot of overlap. I'm not even sure who to give credit to now for some of the content. But here's an example of a way that she starts to explain like somebody's model of the world, right? So she would say, imagine that there's 6 advertisements by Bob's Rain Boots on keeping your feet dry, right? But the 6 ads come in 6 forms, right? So the first one is keep your feet dry, Bob's Rain Boots. Second one, avoid getting your feet wet. Third, want to keep your feet dry. Fourth, got to keep your feet dry. Fifth, ways to keep your feet dry. And 6, how to keep your feet dry. Small little changes in language. And if you start to go through some of her work, and there's others that study this as well, what you realize is that each one of those styles showed something about the personality type of who you were dealing with. So there's going to be some statements that you will hear, like Phil Jones, I think has a few lines that in my mind are like, wow, this feels universally true, right? That open-minded line. And then there's going to be some others that say, listen, no, personality types have a difference in impact, right? If somebody is a move towards type of person, they're going to respond more to the language of keep your feet dry. And if somebody in their life is naturally a move away from person, right? This is the constant kind of pain pleasure continuum. They're going to respond more to the ad of, do you want to avoid getting your feet wet, right? If somebody is internally motivated, meaning their sense of like, hey, did I do it right, kind of comes from their own self, they're not going to respond if you tell them they've got to do something. They're only going to respond if you give them the opportunity and they want to do something, and on and on and on. So we'll walk through these, and this comes from a concept called meta programs, right? So everything that I just described there is this idea in NLP called meta programs. Meta programs are another filter through which we process our world. Knowing people's meta programs, right? Are they moving towards or away from? Are they internal? Are they external? You can help you often with the type of information that will help them make an effective decision. You can easily identify their patterns by asking questions. All right. So here's a series of questions that as you start to like weave these into your industry and what you're doing, these questions start to give you a sense of the personality type you're dealing with. So let's talk about this one, towards or away from. Imagine asking somebody the question, what do you want in a job? Or like we just used, what do you want in a house, right? Towards people are motivated by desire and pleasure. Away from people are motivated by fear and pain. Now, can we just agree none of us are so simple that we should go around the world labeling people as towards people and away from people? And at the same time, if we understand that like there's a lot of personalities out there, and if we can find ways to treat people in the way that they would want to be treated according to their map, their model of the world, that's great for them, great for us, and great for the relationship. And that's what we're focused on here. Less about labeling people in a way that they can't be fixed, and more about helping to appreciate them for who they are and understand ways to interact with them. So to motivate a towards person, describe a goal or reward. To motivate an away person, describe something negative. All right, next one. Internal or external. So how do you know when you're really good at something? This would be an example of the type of question that when you ask somebody, how do you know when you're really good at something? In fact, if you haven't already cheated and looked down below, think about how you would answer that question. How do you know when you're really good at something? Internal people look at themselves to make decisions. External people look to others. So to motivate internal people, find out what's important to them and describe your product with those criteria in mind. Motivate external people by using testimonials and statistics to show what others think, right? When you're selling a house in a particular neighborhood, when you can talk about what others think about the neighborhood or the accolades that the neighborhood has gotten in the city newspaper, that impacts external people more than it's going to impact internal people. And in fact, if you're the sort of person that's like, I hate it when people push their opinion on me, you might be an internal person that is interacting with somebody who is treating you as if you were external. All right, possibility or necessity. Why did you choose your present job or product or car or house? Why did you choose X? Some people are motivated by the possibilities in a situation or product. Others are motivated only when they see the necessity of buying or changing, right? Why did you buy your current car? Because this new technology came out and I was really excited and I wanted the first hybrid, right? Or I wanted a self-driving car. Or somebody else's, why did you buy your most recent car? And the answer is because my engine blew up on my last one and I was at 100,000 miles, whatever it might be. This is absolutely going to have an impact when you think about somebody purchasing, I don't know, the biggest asset they've ever bought in their life. If they're buying real estate, like why did you choose your last house? And understanding their buying patterns comes into possibility or necessity. Now, matcher or mismatcher. This is an idea of when somebody in a relationship, in fact, I've got a daughter right now that as I started to prepare this content, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can totally see why we are not in rapport sometimes in our relationship because I'm constantly trying to be a matcher in the relationship and she's being a mismatcher. There's not right or wrong here. Here's a way to understand it. If I were to show you, put 3 coins on a table right now and said, what's the relationship between these 3 coins? Some of you on the call would say things like, well, they're all U.S. currency. They're all silver. They're all round. They all have indentations on the top. And somebody else would say, well, they're each one of them is a different denomination. This one's worth a nickel. This one's worth a quarter. And they all have different faces on them. And the years are all different on each of them. Okay. So what we just had is we just had one personality point out everything that was similar. And we had another personality point out everything that was different. There's not a right or wrong here, just difference in personalities. Now, matchers look for sameness or how things are alike. Mismatchers focus on how things are different. There are two types of matchers, two types of mismatchers. You want to motivate each one differently. So matchers, sameness. These people see everything as the same. To motivate them, relate your product or service to something positive in your past. If you're selling a house to a matcher who focuses on sameness, they're moving to a new town. Maybe they're moving to your location, and they just moved from California. And they just want you to find them the house where you are that is like the house that they just left in California, right? And it's driving you crazy because you're like, but it's just different out here, right? The architecture is different. Everything's different. The reality is these people are going to buy based on something that feels like it is the same for them, right? Sameness with exception. These people see everything as most things as the same, but with some things different. To motivate them, show them how your product is like other things they've experienced and also how it's unique. So showing a little bit of how it's similar and then showing a little bit of uniqueness in it. Sorry for the typos there. A lot of slides to proofread before these things. Mismatchers. So polarity. And this is, you might understand where I'm at with one of my kids right now. Whatever you say, these people do the opposite to motivate them. So whatever you say, these people do the opposite. To motivate them, tell them to do the opposite of what you really want. Or mismatch by counterexample. Every time you suggest a possibility, these people give you a counterexample. To sell them, give them counterexamples before they even have the chance. So matchers and mismatchers. By the way, I noticed this even inside my own team when we're looking at making a change, right? Let's say that we're going to adopt new software and you want your team to adopt a new CRM and you've got matchers and mismatchers on the team. If you go into the team meeting and you say, oh my gosh, guys, this is going to be fantastic, brand new software, totally cutting edge. It's unlike anything we've ever seen before. And it's going to be brand new and it's going to put us at a whole new level in our business. Okay, that was great for one type of personality. And that was terrible language for anybody in your organization that is a matcher, right? What a matcher wants to hear is it's basically like the system that we were using with a few slight upgrades that will make it faster and more efficient for our team or something of that nature. All right. Self, others, or details. This distinction is made by observation, not by asking questions. Some people are motivated by how a purchase or decision affects them. Some people are equally motivated by how a purchase or decision affects others, right? When you start to ask people, tell me what's important in this home buying process to you, and you start to hear their answers, are the answers about them? Are the answers about others in their lives? I don't know about you, but I've had situations where I forgot to ask this. I missed this. And I go through the entire process, think that they are only motivated by themselves, only to realize later on when another decision maker comes in that their motivation on behalf of others was incredibly strong. Completion or process. So what do you enjoy most in life? Getting things done or being involved in the process? Take a look at this. Process people enjoy the process. They may want to be with you 3 or 4 times because they love the process of buying. Completion people need completion so powerfully that if you start getting them to fill out an application or a set of agency paperwork or whatever it might be, they'll feel compelled to complete it, right? We can all think of clients that if we send them our pre-listing paperwork and we send it to their home and it's, all right, here's some stuff I need you to fill out first to get your home on the market. And by the time we go meet with them, it's all filled out and it's just this smooth process all the way along. And there's other people that it's like, I can tell they are a process person. They don't want to be rushed in the process. They don't want to go straight from start to finish right now. They are enjoying the process. Understanding the two differences makes a big difference. Convincer strategy. How do you know when people are really good at what they do? Do you have to see it, hear it, do it with them, or read about it, right? So a whole strategy of how do you know when something's good? And when you understand how they will know, if somebody says, I need to see it, this is something that's going to need to get out and tour properties, right? I need to see it. I need to touch it. If somebody is like, I need to hear about it, this is possibly something that you could give a phone call to and walk through the benefits of this offer or this contract, and it works. with a completely different personality type, you need to hop on a Zoom call with them and show them everything that you're talking about. All right, generality or specificity. Do you want the big pictures or do you want the details? Right? We can all think about clients that are one or the other. Don't bore the generalist with minor details, and don't leave the specific person in doubt by only presenting the big picture. And then past or future. What's most important to you? A product's past performance or its future possibilities. Understanding where somebody is oriented there is going to impact the way that you sell the benefits of something, whatever you're selling, or even selling the benefits of your services. Cost or convenience. Which is more important to you, that this product is cost effective or that it makes things easier? For most Americans, convenience is more important than cost. Pay attention to what's most important to people as you're dealing with them. All right, step 2. Now, that was a lot. And all of that was in the framework of understanding their model of the world. I just walked you through about 12 different questions that if you go pick up that book, Words That Matter, or I'm sorry, the Words That Change Minds, that will walk you through a lot of those questions and then a lot more from that. Step number 2, building rapport. Matching and mirroring with our body language, our voice, and our words. So you've probably heard this language, matching and mirroring. We're going to walk through a few examples of it here in this concept of building rapport. So I love this quote by Tony Robbins. I remember hearing him share this live. When two people meet, if there is rapport, right? And there's not always rapport, but when two people meet, if there is rapport, then the person who is the most certain, okay, so that is this internal certainty, and flexible, meaning they are able to maneuver their way of relating to this person rather than the other way around, that person is going to be doing the influencing. So when two people meet, if there is rapport, then the person who is the most certain and flexible will influence. People like people who are like them. And when we talk about building rapport and mirroring and matching, we are talking about this concept of how do we be like people. So the few different ways that we think about building rapport. The first one that comes to mind is body language, right? So when you think about interacting with clients, right? I think about going over to a seller's home and we're walking through the home. And the first thing that I'm starting to notice is, how does this person walk? If this person walks into a room, how do they stand in the room? Are they big and imposing? Do they shrink a little bit? What is their body posture style? And how, as we're walking through the home, hopefully within the first room or two, I can start to mirror and match that body language, right? If they run quickly into a room and say, "Ta-da! This is the family room," then that's okay body posture to use, right? But if they're timidly walking through a room and then you jump in with big body motions, that's not going to work as well, right? So mirroring body language. Number 2, mirroring with tone, body language. And then number 2, mirroring with tone and language patterns. So a phrase that I want you to write down here is keyword backtracking. Keyword backtracking. This is a simple idea that when people use words, if what you do in your head is you start to paraphrase it, right? They say the word serenity when they think about moving to the country, and you write down peace and quiet. And then later on in the conversation, you say, "Isn't this house going to be great for you? You're going to have a lot of peace and quiet out here." That's okay, but it's not nearly as powerful as using the exact word that they used, which was serenity, right? So keyword backtracking is that when you are listening to somebody, resist the urge to paraphrase them. Actually pay attention to the exact words that they choose to use, because those words have a deep meaning for them. And when we want to build rapport, we want to use that meaning. By the way, probably the single biggest word that you could use to build rapport with any other human being is their name. That's how we do it. Now, here's another concept I want to give you when it comes to rapport. And that is something called psychological safety. And I have this image here of these goalposts, right? And as if somebody was kicking a field goal. And here's the image I want you to imagine. Imagine stretching out this goalpost so it's the entire size of the football field. In other words, we want to make it very, very easy for somebody to score, or we want to make it very, very easy for somebody to feel safe with their answer. Now, what does that mean? Sometimes if I'm talking with a client, I will say things like, I'll bring up a topic of why do you want to buy a home, or what do you think of this house, or what do you think about selling your home? Or let's say a seller, we get an offer on their property and the offer is not ideal. And I'll say, I'm really curious to know what you think about the offer that just came in. And before they give an answer, I will actually create the goalpost. Oftentimes I'll do it with my hands if I'm actually in a conversation with them. And it might sound a little bit like this. I might say, yeah, I have some clients that if they got an offer like this, they would say, heck no, we don't even want to respond to this offer. We're totally offended. And then I have other clients that if they got an offer like this, they would say, you know what, it's lower than we wanted, but it helps us move on with our lives. And let's at least entertain the conversation. And so I'm sorry, I realize I'm out of the frame here. Let me get back in here. So what I'm doing in that scenario is that I'm creating extreme answers that I think any of their next answers are going to fall inside of. What I basically have just said is I've heard the whole spectrum. There's nothing you could say that would shock me. I've heard everything in between here, and I'm giving them a lot of wide latitude so that their answer can fall inside of that space and be okay, as opposed to saying, do you think this is a good offer? Is this one you want to move forward with? And now I just created a very, very narrow place for them to score in, or for them to build rapport. That breaks a ton of rapport if all of a sudden your clients don't feel like the conversation they want to have with you is a safe conversation to have. All right, let's shift on to the idea of how do you lead? How do you actually change somebody's how do you influence others, right? And how do you do that by changing related to physiology, focus, and meaning? So another Tony Robbins quote, obviously I'm a fan. All change is nothing but finding a new pattern of thinking, feeling, and behaving that meets a person's need on a deeper level than the previous pattern. All change is nothing but finding a new pattern of thinking, feeling, and behaving that meets a person's need on a deeper level than a previous pattern. So if you're going to write anything down, just pay attention right now to physiology, focus, and language. We're going to talk through each of those three. We're going to spend a lot of time on focus. That's probably just, that's the area I've been focused on lately. I also love this. I think Phil Jones is brilliant. To me, the primary job description of all sales professionals is to be decision catalysts. What a great way to understand it. Decision catalysts in the lives of their customers and prospects. Yes, so the job can be more simply described as a professional mind maker upper. Our goal is to empower our clients to make smart decisions, whatever that means for them. And a lot of what we're doing when we influence our clients is we're actually just clearing out the cobwebs of all these other thoughts that don't belong there so that our clients can think clearly. So physiology first. Now, at first when I was thinking about, well, how does physiology show up? My first thought was, well, this is really something that's kind of hard to do with the client. I mean, you can't really say to a client, hey, stand up. You can't tell a client to take deep breaths. But I do notice this. When I have bad news to share with the client, let's say I get an email late at night and it's not good news. Maybe it's somebody wants to get out of a contract, or a really hairy home inspection addendum, or whatever it might be. Sometimes in the past, what I would do is I'd send that email on over. And then I realized I'm not doing anything to help my client in that scenario, because here I have a client, they're at the end of a long day. Maybe they have an email day. They're tired, they're hungry, they're exhausted. And then they get slammed with a bad email from their agent, right? I'm not doing anything in that sense to help them prioritize their physiology. So what do? I wait till the morning when we're all fresh, when I have my best energy to give to the conversation, right? I'm not exhausted or tired or focused on family at that time. And they're able to focus a little bit more as well, right? Now, obviously that could vary. You might say, well, my client's a night owl. Great. Then reverse it. The point is, are we even thinking about our client's physiology, right? You certainly want to be thinking about it for yourself, right? You certainly want to be thinking about, do you know which clients, when you are talking to them, even if it's on the phone, you should be sitting down, Or which clients, when you're on the phone with them, you should be standing up. In general, we would say, well, you should stand up, you'll have more energy. Well, absolutely. That might be exactly what you should do with some clients if you're mirroring and matching their energy. But if another client that you're talking to is taking the call from the waiting room at the doctor's office and they're whispering to you on the phone and you are standing up and you've got a bunch of big movement and you're talking loudly, that was absolute rapport breaking in that situation. That might be a client that you want to sit down and you want to soften your voice with, right? Now, it is interesting, right? I had this example of, I was thinking, well, where does this actually show up for me with clients? And I'm like, it actually does show up when I'm walking downtown showing properties. So if I'm showing properties with a client and we just went and saw a house, and I think it's a great house for them, and we could drive to the next house. It's a couple blocks. We could go drive there, or we could walk it. I'm like, let's take a walk. And now all of a sudden, much like this image, right? You're walking side by side with the person, and as you're walking side by side, our cadence is the same. We're walking together. They're taking fresh air. They're getting breaths. So if I say in that walk, hey, what were the highlights of that home for you? All of a sudden, it actually shifts their physiology. And in shifting their physiology, it actually shifts something in their whole body, right? Shifts their body, starts to shift their mind, starts to shift how they think about something. So physiology first is the first thing I would say. Number two, think about changing the focus. And I'm going to give you a few examples of this. The first thing to understand about changing focus is this. We are all receiving millions and millions of bits of information every second, right? While I'm doing this webinar, I've got notifications popping up on my screen that I thought I silenced them all, but some of them apparently not. And while I hear a dog in the background, and while you're watching me on this presentation, you've got a million things as well. And your cell phone is beeping and everything else. The reality is we all learn to ignore some things and focus on other things. Some of that is conscious. Some of it is absolutely unconscious. So ask yourself, as we have so much information coming at us, what are my clients? What are they generalizing, distorting, or deleting? Right? We'll often get this when you get a lot of activity on a property, and the client says, "Well, nobody's looking at my property." Right? Well, that's a weird thing to say, and then you think that you're actually trying to answer this logically. Well, no, let me show you the showing log, and the reality is they're in a state where it's simply a matter of their focus needs to shift. If you want to influence them, you've got to find a way to shift their focus and do it in a way that works for them. So here's an example of a shift in focus, and it's called maybe the slide is, well, we'll come back to it. But the idea is a pattern interrupt. So Phil Jones tells a story about, like, you're going to meet with a client, and if you just sit down and start with the question of what do you know about, and then whatever the answer is, he's like, that puts the brain in a totally different state. You're sitting down with the client, they have an agenda in their mind of what they want to talk about, and you start with this open-ended question of what do you know about AI? If that's not exactly what they're thinking about right there, it sends their brain in a different direction trying to find an answer. It is a pattern interrupt of what they were focusing on. They were focused on this for a moment. You asked them a question. They absolutely just had to shift their focus over here to think about it. Another example is if you ask somebody the question at the end of a presentation, do you have any questions? Their brain was thinking about what you were just saying. You ask them the question, do you have any questions? And now they just focus on how they should have some questions, right? He says, don't do it that way. Just say this. What questions do you have for me? Now, if in that moment they're like, I don't have any questions. Perfect. Then we're ready to move on. It's just a matter of how you're actually refocusing energy with the questions that you're asking. I think about this a lot, and I use these words of associating and disassociating. So associating and disassociating is some neuro-linguistic programming, so NLP language. And I'm going to walk you through a few examples of how I do it. But so associate, imagine you've said to a client before, can you see yourself living here? Can you see yourself living here? That is a way of taking a client and associating them, right? Almost having them get into the driver's seat and in that car of that story, right? Can you see yourself living here? You just did something with your language to associate them to that scenario, to that property, right? Disassociating, you could think about it this way. So you've got a seller and you're selling in the Northeast. There's snow. Could you imagine being on a beach in Florida, no longer needing to shovel snow in the winter? And in a way, what we're doing right there is we're disassociating them from this property and trying to associate them with something that gives them more pleasure, right? So we're disassociating them from the parts of this property that give them pain, reassociating them with something that gives them pleasure elsewhere. So a few of these things to think about focus. We just talked about a pattern interrupt, and well, we'll go through a couple more of them. I'm sorry, that's where the duplicate was. All right, bird's eye view. When you think about a bird's eye view, I want you to imagine that you are helping take a client and you're helping pull them up outside of their own life, so they are looking at their own life as if from above, right? A bird's eye view, but the bird's eye view is of their own life. Okay. This is when we talk about like I can't see the forest through the trees, or I just need to get the 30,000 foot view perspective. One of the greatest things that we can do for clients when we are trying to create influence in the idea of refocusing them is help them lift up from where they currently are to a vantage point that they can see things more clearly, right? They can see multiple sides of it. They can certainly see multiple sides of their own life. So oftentimes with just had a client this past week where what that looked like was she didn't want to accept an offer on a property because she'd be selling it for a little bit under what she wanted. She'd lose a little bit of money or some of the equity that she just didn't want to give up. And what pulling her up to a bird's eye view meant in that scenario was looking at all of her investments, all of her financial decisions, and looking how this one small giving up a little bit of equity here to get the sale done. When you looked at it from the big picture, it had the frame looked totally different for her. So that's the concept of a bird's eye view. Second thing is using the idea of the stories of others as a way for our clients to learn. So if you're interacting with a client and you find it hard to tell them what you want to tell them, maybe you're wanting to give them advice on selling their home, or you want to give them advice on buying a home. One approach that you probably do it naturally, but just as a way to understand it, one approach that you might want to use is actually just helping them think through that same scenario, but show it to them as a movie or tell it to them as a story. And the way you can often do that is it's almost like what I did a moment ago. Let me tell you about a situation I had with a client last week or last year or in the past, or let me tell you about a story about a client that one of my colleagues at the office had, right? Anytime that you can tell a story and you can take your client out of the action seat, right? And you can put them into an audience so they can observe what's going on, you're going to get a different focus and a different part of clarity inside of their brain, right? Oftentimes when we're so fixed in a situation, that might be we're deep in a negotiation or something went wrong with the home inspection, any number of things in the chaos of our industries. But when we're in the middle of that, our clients don't think as clearly. But when we can pull them out of it and tell them a story about another client that was in the midst of the fray, oftentimes they will think more clearly about what that client should have done, shouldn't have done, will be able to think more logically, et cetera. And when they're able to help that client think more logically, as if they were yelling at the movie screen, that language pattern helps them make better decisions as well. So helping them see through that. Second thing is this idea of time travel. By the way, I'm curious to know what you think of all these images. Every image that I'm showing in here, for the most part, they're all ChatGPT. If you are not playing around with ChatGPT, get after it. I still think a lot of them are stupid, but it's getting way better, guys. It's getting way better at finding a way to share your vision with people, whether those are webinars like these or your clients or yourself, right? This is all ChatGPT generated. So time travel, I think about the question, what if? If you take nothing else in this presentation, write down the question, what if? The fastest way to move past almost anything in a transaction is to start a question with what if. It creates a hypothetical that assumes that whatever you need to get past you get past. So I'll give you an example. A client wants to make an offer on a property, and it's a low offer. And so you're going round and round how this isn't the right offer, and look at these comps and everything else. And you simply back up and say, what if the seller accepts another offer? Or what if the seller counters back at this? Or what if you don't get this house? And all of a sudden, all of the things that you think are the nature of the conversation right there, it just speeds them along to the other side of it. When I have a buyer that has unrealistic expectations about what they can buy, here's what I want to spend, and here's what I want, and it's got to have this many bedrooms and this condition and everything else. I say, fantastic. Let's go out and search for that. I do have a question for you. What are you going to do if you look in this price range for these amenities and you can't find it? What is plan B? And the moment that we start asking these what if questions, we get to a point in that relationship that it speeds past everything that we were dealing with. So again, the whole framework here that we're talking about is how do you influence others? You influence others by changing their focus, by changing their word patterns. And when you are able to say to a client, what if this doesn't work? What will you do then? You're literally distorting time, because you're asking them to think at a different time than where they are right now and tell you what they would do in that scenario. And sometimes you can get past through most of the problems of a transaction simply by having them move ahead in the process, right? Sometimes backwards as well, but we'll stick with moving ahead. All right, so here's an example, Phil Jones using this exact same concept, right? How would you feel if, right? It doesn't really matter what the next part of the question is. In his case, how would you feel if you doubled your sales next month? But the reality is you're just moving somebody along. The more contrast you can create between where somebody does not want to be and where they hope to be, the more likely you are to get people to move, right? So the way that you create contrast is you have them take their current decision and extrapolate it into the future. What if you list your home at this price and 6 months from now we're still sitting on the market? How would you feel, as an example? All right, a couple more questions. Well, imagine 6 months from now and that you just settled. The other way that I'll use this is to minimize the negativity today, right? Imagine if 6 months from now we're having a beer and we cheers to the fact that, man, it was a rough road, but you got through that transaction and your life was so much calmer on the other side. What would that feel like? And all of a sudden, we just take all the tension of what's going on right now and we encapsulate it into a moment in time, and we can actually help them see beyond that. Another phrasing with this, just imagine. This is the same concept, right? Of anytime you use the idea of getting them into their imagination, you get to literally like bypass the laws of physics. You get to put them into a space. Just imagine this happen. That is shifting their focus from like how something can be done to what they actually want. Just imagine is a stated equivalent to once upon a time. When you hear the words just imagine, the subconscious brain kicks a switch, opens up the image viewer, and it cannot help but picture the very scenario you are creating. All right, next one. Go ahead, hop in the driver's seat, take it for the weekend. The number of times that we want to pull a client out of a situation, right? There's times of that we want to disassociate them. We want to pull them up in their timeline and move them forward or backwards, or we want to pull them up to this bird's eye view. At the same time, there's a lot of times that we actually want to put somebody directly into the situation. If you've ever walked a client into a home and you get into the family room and you say, the family room in the kitchen, and you say, hey, could you guys imagine celebrating Thanksgiving here? What you are doing in that moment is you're doing the opposite. You're not disassociating, right? You're actually absolutely associating with them with something. It's the same principle that a car salesman would use to say, go take a test drive, right? Like, I want you to see yourself sitting in the driver's seat. What if this was your car? We do that in almost anything that we sell, in any way that we influence. We have this mix of patterns where we will take people out of it and we'll put them back into it. So it's associating and disassociating. This is an associating strategy right here. Third, or the next thing that I use is changing the idea of their focus. So if you find that a client is always in their emotions, you might want to move them into their head or into their gut. If you find that somebody is always in their head, right, a highly analytical person, there might be times that you want to move into your heart. You'll know this because this is language that you've already used, right? If you said to somebody, well, what does your gut say? Right? Or what feels right to you? Those are language patterns. Again, we all naturally do this stuff. Just want to explain, if you think about it, there's 3 types of intelligences we have, right? 3 centers of intelligence, our head, our heart, and our gut. And so when we find ourselves stuck in relationship with somebody and we feel it in this impasse of helping them move forward, oftentimes it's actually just about associating them with one of their other means of intelligence, right? A lot of time, the person that is thinking through something can't get through the issues that they're having on a contract. And then if they are just offered the opportunity to say, well, you know, what does your heart say? What are you feeling in this? And letting them actually lean on that center of intelligence makes a difference. This is not to say that you are telling them what they should feel or that you are trying to insert your feelings into them, right? This is from them. All right. Next concept, it's called a parts integration. So when we are having conversations with our clients and they share a feeling with us. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I just sent an offer over to a seller. She was not happy with the number. Okay. So she gets an offer. She's not happy with it. And she says to me, I'm unhappy with this offer. It's too low. That is true. That's how she feels, right? But it's not the only thing that is true for her. And the concept of parts is this constant realization that we have warring thoughts. We have paradoxes in our own mind, right? And inside of one, this yin yang symbol sort of like, hey, in the midst of this is always a little bit of this, right? So in this quote, one brush stroke stands for danger, one for opportunity. In a crisis, be aware of the danger, but recognize the opportunity. When our clients are expressing only one viewpoint, one of the ways that we can help influence them is by inserting in or actually making space for the other part of them to express the feeling. So, for example, that same client that got a low offer, the conversation might be, I know that part of you is really frustrated by this offer. I absolutely can appreciate that. And then I might actually create space for something else by saying, I also know that there's another part of you that absolutely just wants to be done with this home and move down to Florida. And I am here to support whichever you want. But I know that from things you've shared with me, both of those are true. And all I did there is I just gave a little bit of space to a part of their perspective that was getting boxed out, was getting overshadowed by the dominant emotion. They're both true. They're both feelings that they've had. There might be feelings that have come up in the initial consultation with the client, and we're creating space for people. So the way I want you to think about this is if you're interacting with a client and you hear one dominant thought, one dominant emotion, just understand nobody is that simple. There is always a yin yang going on in the hearts and minds of every human that we're interacting with. And what you are getting right there is part of what they think, part of what they feel. Our role is to make space for the other part of it. All right. Last section. So if that was focusing, changing the focus, right? Like parts, changing the focus from one part to another part. The last idea is where you start to actually change meaning or language. And this just has a lot to do with the words that we use, right? So remember earlier we talked about keyword backtracking. This is where that stuff comes up. When we can actually change the meaning, we start to use their words. We key in on them. We use their magic words. We use some of these, universal things that we think appeal at the level of an identity. And then perhaps most importantly, we reframe conversation. So if you haven't heard of the concept of reframing, well, one, we do it all the time. Anyway, anytime somebody says to you, well, look on the bright side of it, right? That is a reframing statement. You were looking at it one way, and they literally said, turn it and look on the bright side of it. They're wanting to reframe the focus of what's there, and they're wanting to manipulate it. not in a bad way, but they actually want to like maneuver it. I love this from Tony. I never let somebody define a problem in a way that it is impossible to solve. If you find a client defining a problem in a way that it is impossible to solve, make the shift to reframe it. So when you think about reframing, there's three types of ways that framing can work: pre-framing, reframing, and deframing. Okay, pre-framing. Pre-framing is when you say something up front. You might say something in the buyer consult, right? Or even setting people up for the buyer consult. If we say, hey, I'm going to be sharing something with you that's really going to help save you time and money in the home buying process. That is what we would call a pre-frame, right? You said some words that set up the next conversation, and you pre-framed the way that they are going to listen to the words that come out of your mouth next, or what come out of your mouth at the consult. They are going to be listening more attentively for the things that will save them time and money in the home buying process, right? A reframe is more doing it in the moment. It's less about setting up for something in the future, but in the moment. So when I have a client that said to me, hey, I'm really concerned about overpaying for the property. I said, well, I can appreciate that. I mean, I don't think anybody wants to overpay for a property. Now, it's a little tricky though, because by definition, if you were to get your offer accepted, it did likely mean not that you overpaid, but that you paid over what others were willing to do. Now, what I just did is I took those two words, I just flipped them, right? And I reframed the concept or the objection that they were bringing about overpaying, and said, well, you might not, nobody wants to overpay, but we may need to pay over, right? And then deframing. Deframing is when you take, somebody comes to you with an issue. Just imagine they bring a picture frame to you with a picture, and in the picture is the problem. They bring it to you, and this is where you're actually like smashing the frames. And this isn't even the issue at all. Or if you don't want to smash the frame, just set it aside. But you're picking up something else, right? Somebody says, I don't know that I want to make these repairs, right? Or they're complaining about the cost of repairs on a property they're selling. And we might say, well, I mean, I understand that, like, you're wanting to talk about whether you want to make repairs. I'm just worried that this buyer might completely back out of the transaction. Now, we just took what they took as the frame, right? I'm nickel and diming over these repairs, and we absolutely shifted the frame to a completely different topic of, we might not even be able to keep this buyer. That's a deframe of what the topic was. So all these are conversations around how do you change the meaning? The number one way that you change meaning is by pre-framing, reframing, deframing, all types of frames. All right. Phil Jones reframes with the language of, the way I see it, you have three options, right? So here's one of his great lines. The way I see it, you have three options. Now, understand, the minute that you start with that in a conversation, the way I see it, you have three options, you just created a frame. You literally just created a world in which there's three ways to do it. And then what he's going to do is he's going to talk about option one, not desirable; option two, not desirable; option three, very desirable. That's would be a classic way to do it. And that's the example that he gives there. The way I see it, you have three options. That is an example of framing a conversation and then lining up your logic inside of it. By the way, again, just another plug for Phil. Go read his book, Exactly What to Say. I think he's doing phenomenal work in this area. And if you have not read that, that's one that I'd absolutely recommend. The right words at the right time can make all the difference. And then I'm gonna end with this quote as we get to the top of the hour here. Always be sure to influence someone in a way that ensures you haven't damaged your ability to influence that person again in the future. That's a great check for yourself. Always be sure to influence someone in a way that ensures you haven't damaged your ability to influence that person in the future. In other words, the other person must have benefited from the change you've created. The reality is these are skills that we can use for good and skills that we can use for evil. And if you are long-term in your industry, if you have your client's best interest at heart, I trust that you're going to use these ways to influence people, and you're going to do that in a way that's going to have a big impact on them in the future. But it's going to be something that if you do it right, they're going to want to come back for your influence again. If you find that you're twisting somebody's words and then they're getting buyer's remorse as a result, that is not at all the nature of how this should be used. So I think it's a great way to end. Make sure that the other person has benefited from the change that you've created. And of course, another plug there for a great person when it comes to influence. Read Robert Cialdini's book. Here's a few books if you want to grab a few of these. Some of these I shared from, some not as much, but all books that you might want to have on your bookshelf when it comes to influence, persuasion, and thinking through word patterns that have an impact with others. And then there's plenty of other courses as well. So Verbal Judo, Magic Words, Persuasion and Influence, same author. Appreciative Inquiry is a style of inquiry that is all positive focus. Think of it again like that language of think on the bright side. Words That Change Minds. I cannot recommend that one enough. And probably the simplest read on here, and the first one I would pick up, is Exactly What to Say. All right, again, save the date. Next webinar coming up here. Love to have you guys join us. I'm going to stay on and take a look at the chats. And if you guys have any questions, let us know. Happy to answer them for a few minutes. And before we end the stream here, I appreciate you guys being on. Thank you for your time.